Hey, Bright Lights, welcome to Architecting. Today, I have with me a really cool guest, Robert Bean, who's the co-founder of Impact, which is a story-driven agency that promotes wellness design and the hospitality sectors. And I really think you're going to enjoy what Robert has to say because we struggle so much sometimes to tell our story and market ourselves. And also love the fact that Robert isn't just geeking out on doing agency work. He has a really interesting background. He's a pilot, motorcyclist, and DJ. So welcome to Architecting, Robert.
Thank you for the very kind intro and super happy to be here.
Well, I would love for you to share a little bit about your very non-traditional path to doing PR and storytelling.
Yes. So I had I had two passions when I was a child, and potentially this is why it might resonate with your audience as well, is because I was super creative as a kid. And I drew and created worlds and played with Legos and really just like created stories. And over the course of time, and going to college or we call it college, but it's like the secondary school before you go off to university, which is college here in the US. There was just this desire to push you towards something that was sensible, right? Like starving artists, don't be a creative, don't do something creative, don't tap into that creativity. And so I tapped into my other passion or love, which I was just like blown away by as a child, and that was aviation. For an initial period of my life, I wanted to join the military and join the Air Force. As I grew up, I soon changed my mind and realized that maybe commercial aviation was a better fit for me. And so I took the path, I took the leap, and ended up going to flight school. A couple of years later, got a job flying the Airbus for EasyJet in Milan. And 1 month into flying, I was coming back from Spain, sun setting behind us, coming back across the French Riviera to Italy. The shadow of the earth was rising above. I was eating my meal, absolutely perfect, right? Like the dream. And a little voice said to me, "This isn't it." So after giving like all that time and money, it's a big investment to be a pilot. I had this just clear message that this wasn't it. And it took me 6 years to even figure out what that could have been. I eventually went part-time, took a bit of space from flying, which is just unheard of for a first officer. Maybe when you're a captain and you've been flying for like 20 years and you're just weathered, you need to take some part-time off. But I went part-time as a first officer and started to just get creative again. Picked up my cat. It took me 6 months actually to get creative. 6 months of like resting, deep rest, and then one day the kind of mind starts to go. It's like, oh, maybe I'll pick up my camera and take some photos, or maybe I'll make some films again. And one day I made a film and a friend said to me, you can charge money for that. And the light bulb like truly went off in that moment. And that was 4 years ago. Since been on a journey of turning this into, coming across like storytelling and narrative focus and character focus and stepping into my worth as a creative and going through the gates that you have to go through of charging, $300 for a film and doing it in the pouring rain and having no team to getting to a place where we can make a living and have a team around us and so on. And so with that, quit my career in aviation, dove headfirst into entrepreneurship, which is another hilarious part of the story. And really just lent into my creativity. And it's been a journey. It's been a definite journey of like sabotage and lack of belief sometimes around creativity. But I know that there's a deeper calling and purpose to be the kind of the archetype storyteller for the world in a breadth of things, not just for business, but as you mentioned in the intro, but like wellness and this next kind of evolution of humanity.
So, what is it that resonates with you about the wellness that you feel so compelled to work with people who are doing that kind of work?
Twofold. It's definitely a twofold answer. Firstly, is my own personal journey in wellness. And I grew up and had a bit of a turbulent childhood, to say the least, around kind of like addiction and so on, and being in those environments. And my own journey, like through aviation and leaving, definitely brought up some aspects within me that I needed to heal. And so my mother is a great inspiration for this. She's a meditation teacher, yoga teacher. She's always been this kind of like holistic focus, good food, grew up with organic food, all of these different aspects. And so I think there's like a deeper calling within me of just that's who I am and that's what I really deeply resonate with. But on the other side of that is, we started in the design sector. We got a little bit lost moving to Boulder, Colorado, where everyone just wears Patagonia, Patagucci as it's called here, and kind of went a little bit into the sustainability sector, but it was more clean tech focused. And in just kind of seeing the disconnect between the efforts around wind farms and sustainability and solar and just tech, whereas the issues that we face as a species is more like psychological and community focused and so on. I saw this disconnect of like, hold on, a lot of effort's being put there, but what if it's the wrong thing? And in kind of asking that question, I started to understand that, oh, design influences us on a far deeper level than tech. And design can heal, design can create community, design can genuinely change the planet to make it a better place for us all to live. And so that was just like an easy movement towards it, like, oh wow, like architects, designers, and hospitality group, all of these people have such a power and an ability to gift such a transformation for us living on this planet.
And I think it's really interesting that you make that link, even in your own story, that you had to rest, you had to take a break, because when we are stressed out, when we're burned out, when we're traumatized, it doesn't leave any space for creativity because we use all our energy just to be in that survival mode. And so it's actually harder to connect with our true selves, harder to
Mm.
focus on well-being. So I didn't pay him to say this, everyone. I always love it because this is something I'm always saying. So it's great that not only in your own life did you come to that conclusion, but that you were able, as an outsider to the design industry, still make that connection because of your storytelling skills, that at the root of everything is well-being, and that this is a profound way to help people make that journey towards well-being.
Big time. And I don't think I was even conscious of it when I was growing up as like a teenager. I wasn't very conscious in general about my day to day. If we look at the environments we kind of lived in around like university times, like they weren't particularly pleasant. And since then I think I've been able to like sense the energetics of space and just can see. I don't know if it's especially in America because obviously in Europe you have very like old architecture that's very beautiful and like a deep culture, but just the built environment here feels just like uncomfortable at times and just almost like oppressive. It's like stressful versus this, I can breathe and flow and so on, which I don't know if that exists anywhere. Maybe this is the next step in our evolution in the built environment, but
No,
I can definitely feel that.
it's actually really interesting that you say that, because I have a friend that does research a lot of neuroscience and space. And what actually led her, because she didn't start out as an architect, this was a career shift later in life, was a trip she made to Europe and noticing how different, because of the density. And something she talks about is called thigmotaxis, means basically the edge, right? And in Europe, there's a lot of like really well-defined edges, whether it's to a public space or along a street. And the science behind that is we register that as safety, because we don't have to monitor the edge if it's
Mm,
defined. And if it's open, we're like, what's going to happen? What's going to suddenly pop in? And I think when you look at a lot of American suburbs, especially with big box stores and parking lots, there's not well-defined edges. There's not good public spaces. There's not a human scale. So it's interesting that you picked up on that, because there's actually science behind that.
okay. That makes sense. It's built for cars, not for people.
Yeah, yeah, in a lot of ways, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So you're just so amazingly in tune with what architects do, but why do you think we struggle so much to have people value that work and the power of design?
A big question. I'm just going to go right to the point. Architects don't value themselves.
Hmm.
I think I've seen it in my life and entrepreneurship is a mirror, right? Like they say relationships are a mirror, to see your truth. Entrepreneurship is a mirror. If your business isn't succeeding the way it wants, it's because of you, period. Um, Next step, if you want to do it, start a business with your partner. That's what we did. It's like a double mirror. Um, and and I've definitely seen like when I haven't valued myself, clients don't value me or our process. Or if I don't value myself, then I don't feel almost like worthy enough to tell them why we're different. And so I feel there's a part of it that, the architecture community is still part of that maybe starving artist mentality. It's like, oh, I'm a creative and so on. I express my creativity in this way, but it's not, you get the couple of architects that do that, but they're labeled star architects, right? You see Bjarke Ingels, he's got a very like strong energy out there into the world, but he values what he does, and so therefore others have valued it too. And so I definitely, yeah, there's that concept of like one needs to, especially in business, like value yourself because marketing is that energy of I'm here. Like you have to put yourself out there and say, "Hey, I'm here. This is what we do." And if you don't value yourself enough to do that, then unfortunately, you'll just end up attracting those that don't value you. And when we are empowered to talk about our process and our why and our values and the way we do business or want to do business, then we will start to attract those that resonate with that. And if we want to attract those that truly resonate with that, we have to put ourselves out there in all areas of business. And so, in the architecture community, especially, there's this kind of, and we kind of talked about it in previous conversations, but like status quo. I think that's where we align here is like break the status quo. There's just been this long-term belief of like, nah, I'll get some referrals. Or if you're a small architect, you look to the bigger firm and get their kind of like loose ends and try and develop a relationship with the older principal. And then when you have that client, oh, I could get some referrals, or maybe I'll put a magazine ad up. But the world's changed. Doesn't quite function on magazine ads and referrals to the degree that it used to. And there's an opportunity now with social media and the online presence and even websites to just do things differently. And I feel maybe no one's given architects permission to do differently. Maybe this podcast is that too, and these different outlets and channels to say like you can do differently, and when you do, you get a better result.
Yeah, I think a lot of times I will hear architects complain that we're being commoditized, that it's all about fee, that other people doing architecture adjacent things like developers and contractors are eroding our book of business. But I agree with you. We're the first ones to devalue ourselves and get into pricing wars.
Mm,
Or we're a lot of times, if you are working in the public sector or working with institutional clients, you have to reply to proposals they put out. That is how you get work. And there's a lot of pressure then to say what they want to hear. Otherwise, you're not going to get an interview and you're not going to get hired.
yeah, no, it's curious as well, and I've always been curious to see how this fits in. So I'm a longtime supporter of Blair Enns. Blair Enns he's an incredible consultant and business development individual. He helps creatives step into their worth, and he has a process called Win Without Pitching, which in the architecture community is like, wait, what? Like, I, is it a choice not to respond to an RFP? Is there an alternate world? And like we've adopted it in our business, and we get sent RFPs, and our first response is, well, we don't respond to RFPs. Thank you. And there's this excuse me, there's this kind of pressure of they're like, oh, it's built this way, and if I get an RFP, I must respond, and it's kind of like a race to the bottom who can kind of bring enough value but price it low enough. And then there are certain times where that gets a little bit mm, untrue, and people start to do funny things like undercutting, but then putting out an amazing design that locks the client in, and these kind of like seedy business practices. And um, when we as business owners decide this is the way that we are doing it and it's company policy, then we will attract those. And even if an RFP comes through the door, if we say, hold on, like we're experts in this area, people seek us out and we're sought out for our expertise in this specific area because we've identified our uniqueness and our story that's really important. We are then the ones that can drive the conversation. We are no longer just at the mercy of how the industry has always done it. And that's where I get excited because, the way that we've implemented Win Without Pitching, it transcends to architecture and interior design and so on. It's like when the architect decides to take their power back, they can.
I love that. Like you've shared in the past that 79% of people don't know what architects do. That's both shocking, but also not that surprising. I feel like we don't really have a lot of transparency of process. And as somebody who, might see an architect portrayed on TV or in a movie, I'm always shocked by how wrong they get it. People really don't understand.
Yeah, big time. And yeah, I have a couple of extras. 86% have no ideas. Architects select, negotiate, and manage contractors. 9% do understand architects control site budgets. There are a few more. This came from a study by the Architects Journal. And what's being said, or at least reading through the lines, that there is a war going on, almost like a war of ignorance and a war of education. And architects can either blame the client or blame themselves. Most businesses would blame themselves. Most industries would blame themselves. Oh, our clients don't get it. We'll educate them. Marketing 101. But, architects can either accept responsibility for the educational process, i.e., marketing, and take their client back, or it gets worse. And it just gets worse and worse and worse, time and time again, year after year.
Yeah, it really is a problem. And I also see that same frustration that you're talking about, that it's out of my control. And that's really where you feel that you come in because you see yourself as somebody who can fill in the gaps. So could you talk a little bit about how you do that?
Sure. So our core, at the foundation of everything that we do is story first. I fell in love with storytelling years ago, and the core concept of story is what a story is to us is a character asking a question and going on a journey to subsequently answer that question. Typical conflict journey resolution. And we can see the same applied throughout brand and in business. And so for us, the most important thing for us is to understand like what is the core of this business? What is the core ethos? What is the core why? How does this firm differentiate themselves? I didn't get in business to be a carbon copy of somebody else. I can take inspiration from others, absolutely, but I didn't come into business to be like someone else. I would have just stayed in my previous career if that was it. And I think a lot of architects out there are in that belief of they're like, I am unique. I do have like a thing that I do differently to others. Or a lot of architects, they work for a bigger firm and then they see something that they don't like, or that maybe they could do better, and then they start their own firm so they don't, replicate those same mistakes. 2 years later, they're exactly the same firm. And so we have a breadth of capabilities. Video marketing is the number one thing, but I think because of my aviation background, I'm all about strategy first, execution second, and really understanding like what is the core strategy here? What is that unique approach that you bring that no other person does? And why? Where did it come from? What is it? The combination of experiences that you've had across this, like your life that makes you you. that's actually the core foundation of luxury marketing. If you look at Hermes or Four Seasons, each has their own unique origin story that no other brand can replicate unless it took the exact same steps that that brand took. And so in the architecture world, it's exactly the same. Designers have, a unique journey across their lifetime that has shaped them to who they are. And so our first step is diving deep in a 2-day facilitated workshop to understand like what is that uniqueness, and then subsequently how do we translate that uniqueness across every touch point of the business in a controlled way, because you can control everything, and ensure that from the point that they discover you through to the point of hiring you, the customer process to the offboarding is all controlled and bringing in that unique flavor, bringing in what makes you you. And I feel that's just so important, not just because it creates differentiation, but it empowers people to just have fun in their firm again. It has like time and time again, our clients say to us like, "Oh wow, you've given me permission to step into something I didn't realize I could, but B, I'm so like excited to go out into the world and share my business again because I'd lost that." And we all have it. We all have it within us. We all have that spark that lights us up. And oftentimes we just think in business that we can't let it out. But I beg to disagree.
Yeah, and I think especially because architecture is so technically difficult, it's really hard to just be competent.
Mm,
But if you want to really be doing meaningful work, you have to be more than competent. So part of what we have to unlock is that fun metric. You had mentioned that before when we were talking, that idea that if we can relax a little bit, we can connect the dots. We can start to see not only what our greater purpose is, but why there is joy in doing work that way.
yeah. The fun metric is something that, we practice everything that we preach. And so if we want to make things fun for our clients, like we have to make it fun for ourselves too. And my wife Leela and I, we implemented just this really simple metric of like, are we having fun? Is this fun? Like this new funnel or email marketing or lead magnet or outreach or new kind of addition to our services, is it fun? If it's not, why are we doing it? Because, when we, as creatives especially, if we're not enjoying our day to day, we can't show up in our best way. And if we're just stuck and we're kind of just trying to wade through the mud and our heads barely above water because we're just in the day to day so much, then those gifts are being lost. And yeah, we mentioned at the beginning, like design is such a powerful thing that if the majority of the industry doesn't have their head above water, like what good is that for the greater world? Like there is a lack of purpose within there because unfortunately when you're like struggling month to month, it's hard to see. And sometimes it just takes that one metric of, am I having fun? No. Okay, well, what could be fun in this moment? And then when we have fun, things flow. And when things flow, money flows. And when money flows, like we're in a better position. We can look after our team better and we can give back to our community more and we can see really the gaps where our unique perspective in design can fill that.
And I think when you are in that energy and you're talking to clients, whether you have the job and you're just working through the project or you're trying to get the job, they see that versus when you sound like an anchor person on the 6 o'clock news, that just doesn't resonate. There's no authenticity there. And, I had an old boss who, before we would ever go into an interview, he would always say, remember, first they have to like you.
Yes. People buy from people. People don't buy. We had curious example of this is we did a testimonial film for one of our clients as an architecture interior design firm, and they were telling us about the different features of the build, about these steel beams that they put in. That was like a unique way of solving a problem, and they reused the foundation because they didn't want to change like the imprint and all of this, and And we eventually get to sit down with their clients to tell this testimonial, their story. And halfway through our little pre-interview, they stopped us and it's just they're like, we don't care. We don't sit here, you know, in the afternoon on a nice summer day and be like, those steel beams, great job. What they care about is how they feel in the home. What they care about is the life that they're creating and the family experiences that they have there. And so if, and the experience that they had with that architecture firm over, a 2 year period in building this home, like that's what's important. It's like that interpersonal connection point. And one little extra thing that we say is like if you can speak to your clients in fifth grade English, then you're gonna win. But if you complicate it and make it about the process and too much about kind of the architecture speak, then people are lost because at the end of the day, you're providing an end result for them. That end result isn't actually the home or the building. It's how it's being utilized and the feeling that they have within it and so on. And so yeah, it's an interesting interesting aspect. But I've seen it in many industries. Filmmakers are also bad for it. They'll be there like, we have this 4K camera and it shoots, raw, and people are like, I don't care. Are you a nice person? Are you going to help me succeed? Okay, great.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And especially with architecture, some people are more interested in making sculpture. Other people are more interested in pure functionality. But what makes great architecture great is exactly what you said. It's how it makes you feel. And while it does have to function, and of course we care about beauty, beauty is an important part of the experience, there's more to it than either of those ends. And I think what we often don't know how to do is talk about that in between space. We're talking
Mm.
about it from the two extremes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if, it's the status quo part. It's that maybe it's a pride aspect. Maybe it's just this desire for perfectionism that the industry has, and that, the end result is only shown. The end photos are only shown. It's like the big reveal, right? Like we've been head down for 2 years. You don't know anything about it. And then, oh, we've got the beautiful images at the end. And there's like, what about the 97% of the project that isn't showcased here? Where's that story? What about the process made it a good result? What was it about your expertise that made it a good result? What about the challenges that you obviously faced and overcame clearly? There's so much, extra material in there that is never shared, and yet that's where the magic actually is. That is also where you can share your expertise in a way that says, hey, we are more than qualified for this. And so subsequently, you don't need to push back on price. But when you just share those final images, it's tough. It's tough to justify your price, to justify your process if you simply just don't speak about it. And yeah, it's a curious reality.
Yeah, I love that you said that because a lot of times what I ask guests to explain, and we started with you too, is what is your origin story? And the reason I do that is because it's very easy to look at a finished product or a person who has achieved a certain amount of success, and you don't really have perspective on what it meant for them at certain key milestones in their life to have overcome the hardship. And
Mm,
you could hear the facts, oh, they overcame this or that, but it doesn't mean anything because you already know the end result. But
mm,
if you actually hear what it felt like for them when they weren't sure that what they did was the right thing to do, but why did they do it anyway? And if they had setbacks, how did they know whether to give up or keep going? And I think that the same is true when we're talking about the design process, not just the end result of the design, is how did we actually get there? And where were the times where the client wasn't so sure or they pushed back? And how did they feel that you talked them into doing this or that or something that maybe they thought was risky. How did you help them feel comfortable going in that direction? And we just really don't give that BTS point of view at all.
And it's so needed. I think there's just such a lot of influence from the likes of, if we just look in the residential space, like Architectural Digest and even like the local project, huge YouTube channel that just shows beautiful results. And they have millions of subscribers. I have to question, I think the majority of them are just architects and designers that just love it, versus kind of like the end users. But there's just, there are so many more stories in between that, when told, truly can transform your business. When told, will help create that outcome that you really want in life and growth and so on. And you've mentioned so many of them, and a lot of people in this space think that there's just one story to tell, and that's just like the product, the these walls that are made of objects that can't speak, like that there's no soul within them without you even, yeah, look at a home, like you could have a beautiful home but without the family in it, it's nothing.
Right.
So like what does the space matter if there isn't life within it? And so telling the story of that life and the life that created it, that's where the magic truly lies.
And it occurs to me that it's also important for other architects and designers to hear that process story as well, because otherwise there's a myth created that, well, anybody can do this. But the truth is, the magic is in the process. It doesn't matter how talented you are, if you can't connect with people, if you can't meet their needs, your project will never have a successful outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, a recent example of this, we're working with a GC in New Jersey, and they want to kind of like up level their projects. But they do a lot of renovations. They would want to do a lot of new builds and are reaching out to architects, and we've developed a strategy around that. But one of the things that they told us about one of their projects, they came from like big construction. They were doing like seaports and like huge construction, and now they're doing, residential. And so they take their expertise from that. But their clients, they don't get it. They don't get why they cost more. They don't get why they should choose them. And they basically like they were telling us a story that they were creating a basement for their clients while their clients were still living in the house above. So they couldn't use like gas powered machines to like get out the rock or whatever they were doing. They had to use this like little electric machine and then with a little electric kind of train to take all of the material out. And they were able to do, I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't even know where to start with that. And there are so many things that architects do that I have zero idea how to do. And the end client really has no idea how to do. And yet the end client, when they don't see the process and they don't understand it, they think, oh, well, how hard can it be? But in reality, they wouldn't be able to do it. And that's why they're hiring them in the first place. But unfortunately, yes, it just becomes this kind of commoditized result.
Yeah, so you've talked a little bit about how you can differentiate, make that person to person connection. How do we get beyond just the selling of, here I am, I'm so great, I'm so qualified, pick me?
Mm. This is where we love to lean in to what I call ethical persuasion through storytelling. When you tell a story, it is essentially like a two-way conversation with whoever you're speaking or showing it to. Like this individual is sharing their truth and the other person is listening. And that other person can determine whether it's a fit or not. It's not, political. It's not rooted in like a deep belief. It's just someone's truth and an expression of it. And yeah, I don't like selling. As a creative either, it's just like if I have to go out and actually like promote myself and sell in that kind of like typical way, I don't like it. But when we look at storytelling as a means of ethical persuasion, and we have 7 story archetypes that we can use across the client experience from your origin story, from your why, like your deeper why, the vision that you have for the industry, great for like wellness designers, a values story, a story of your values, the impact that you've had on the world or your clients or your community through an impact story, and then an objection story and a teaching story. These are all stories that are unique to each other, can talk about process, can talk about why, can talk about the vision or the values. And when placed at the right point in, for lack of a better word, the funnel, so the client journey, they influence ethically that person, i.e., your end client. And you can start to put out, a perspective and a voice that it's not about selling to everyone. It's just about selling to the right people. And oftentimes, when you start telling your story, you start to repel those that you wouldn't want to work with anyway. And it gets to, which is great, right? Like we don't want to work with those clients that walk all over us. And so when we start to put those stories out at the different touch points, it gets to a point that, and this is possible, architects out there, that especially in the residential world, if the person is speaking to 5 firms normally to get a mix, it is possible that they are only just going to speak to you because they deeply resonate with what you're putting out there. And because none of the other 4 firms are actually putting anything out there, you stand out completely. And so you don't need to sell. Um, it's a beautiful feeling when you can just express your truth in your marketing materials. Someone gets on a call with you, then they start to be like reference those materials to you. It's like, oh, I really resonated with that. Oh, that was cool, which gives you even an extra invitation to talk about that on the sales call or the discovery call. And then they make it clear by the end of that first conversation that we really want to work with you. And it comes through just sharing in a way that isn't salesy. It's just, hey, this is us. This is how we do things. If you resonate, great. If you don't, great.
Yeah, I think that is so important. It's almost like proactive, right? Because you're being so clear and so compelling, but compelling to an audience that is going to resonate with you, not to everybody, that you've kind of got them on your side. So even if they are talking to others, they're because the things you said resonated, they're more likely to ask about those things when they talk to competitors, and your competitors are probably not going to give the same answer, or maybe they don't even have an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a power play. And being able to understand, like, yeah, what is that unique flavor that you bring? We work with an architecture studio that adaptive reuse kept coming up. And they weren't doing it, but they love it. Like they would geek out on that all day long if they could. And we did our initial workshop with them and said, hey, like, what if you just lent into that? How would that feel? Like, it would feel easier for sure on a day-to-day basis because it's just like what you love. And so it would just pour from you versus just trying to figure out, like, what should I say? And it's funny as a testimonial, but like they went to an event in the city in Denver the evening after our second day of our initial workshop, and they were talking to someone that about their process, and this lady walks over and it's just they're like, sorry, what did you say? I'm like, what do you do? And the person they were speaking to says, oh, they're an architect. He was like, no, 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 no. Adaptive reuse. Did you say that? So, like, in the middle of this random room, this lady heard adaptive reuse. She's like, I have to speak to you. Gave her the card. The night after our workshop where we uncovered that as their uniqueness. Because why? In my view of that, it's just because it flowed. It's natural. And when we tell our stories, it flows. It's natural. We're not selling. We're just sharing what resonates most with us. And as a result, you attract those. And it might be hard at the beginning to go, oh, but I'm giving up this portion of the market. But oftentimes when you open one door, you see that there are 10 on the other side. It's not a case of like, oh, I'm closing 9 others. It's like, no, open one and the kind of the magic happens. And that only comes as a result of, figuring out that one thing you're really passionate about, differentiating and then sharing the stories around that.
Yeah, I think that is really important, but I think people struggle with that. I mean, I know one of the most clarifying things I ever did was applying for fellowship in AIA because very first thing I had to do was find the story, right? So I could have told you before I did that what I was interested in. It wasn't like I had no connection, but when I had to look back at my whole career, I was like, oh, I've been doing this all along. I never realized it. And I got so much clarity doing that because I had to look at it, but it's hard to do. And I've worked with people and try to coach them through their own fellowship processes, and they really don't know how to connect the dots. And since you are the expert in that, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about how impact helps to excavate that story for your clients.
Hmm. Listening, intuition as well, a little bit. We have a lot of questions, of course, that we can ask, and it depends. Are we doing this in our facilitated workshop to uncover like your brand strategy, your growth strategy, in which we're understanding like your differentiation? Are we just telling your story in video format or written to accompany marketing materials? That the questions and the process that we take that are different, but I think the fundamentals of both are just listening. And I feel that, and it goes back to my own personal journey of creating space to listen to myself and create almost capacity for health within myself allows me to be able to hold space for others to do the same. Is if we don't deeply listen to the conversation with the clients in front of us, like we don't hear the nuances, right? We don't hear that little bit. Oh wait, you just said that. Hold on, can we? Sometimes it's just like pause. We need to pause this process and just like have a conversation about this right now. And I was reflecting on this recently. It's like because we've taken the space and we take the space with our clients, we hear those things. But I would invite anyone that's listening to take the space for yourself in general to do nothing, truly nothing, which is very hard because we're so busy. And I would bet on that we would find that uniqueness, that unique story, that thread, if we just listen to ourselves. In America, it's very hard. Like, we're so busy, right? It's just like, hey, want to get together for like a catch up in Italy? It'd be like that evening. You could do it. In America, it's like, yeah, let me see. 3 weeks time, maybe like 11:30 a.m. Does it sound
And then they
good? 30
cancel four
minutes.
times. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Because there's just like a different energy here. But I've found in my own life when I just stop to listen, just for a moment, through meditations, through my practices, whatever it may be, I know my truth. I know the inner purpose. Like it calls out to you. And when you listen just like a little bit longer, you can't not hear it. And especially as a creative, if you've been like pushing it away for years because the industry says you have to do it a certain way, the first time round, yes, okay, it took me 6 months to get out of aviation and understand what I wanted. But, when we can just take like, so all we do, we create spaces for our clients to hear in a different way. And then we create the marketing materials as a result of it. And we can all do that ourselves. And we can all start to like understand. But yes, if not, then going through a coach or someone like us to facilitate that process does speed it up. But we all have that kind of knowledge within ourselves of what's true to us.
Yeah, I think it can be hard though to get that bird's eye view of your life because you're in the weeds all the
Yeah.
time. So it is really valuable to have somebody that helps you facilitate that or to notice also when you are negating yourself because a lot of times you will hear somebody say I'd love to or I could never do that, and it's like, well, as long as that's what you think, you never will. But let's talk about why you believe that and what's really standing in your way.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the great role of a coach as well, to be able to pinpoint that. And sometimes it's hard to in the position that we are in, we act as consultants. Are we coaches? No. But sometimes we end up being that way. And sometimes we have to kind of just ask permission to speak candidly. Because as you said, like I've heard you say this a couple of times now, and that kind of like messaging isn't in alignment with what we're hearing here.
Yeah, or just even the emotional resonance, like when somebody lights up when they're talking about something, you know they're passionate about it versus when they're just giving you the facts because they think that's what you want to hear.
Yeah, big time. And I don't know what that like the result, yeah, every architecture firm is different. Like their focus point is different, the audience is different, their kind of like end result is different. But a lot of them just have their head like underwater. And and sometimes it's even hard to be able to see because they're underwater, not just like in a capacity level, but resources, financially. It's hard to be able to then go like, hey, I need to reach out to someone. I need to hire that coach. I need to hire the agency because there wasn't like the systems and processes historically to create that abundance that allows you to ask for that help. So I definitely feel, yeah, hiring the coach or consultant is definitely is usually reserved for the slightly larger firms that have done okay. But I wish I had like the answer for the smaller firms that really have their head underwater and can't see a way out. But sometimes it's taking that risk. It's taking like, I know this is going to be the right thing. I know it's a financial investment, but I need to shift up the energy here because it's not working. And even in our growth, we've invested in stuff that historically was way out of reach for where we were at, but we knew that we needed that outside perspective to give us clarity of the steps that we just couldn't see. And we paid for that. And, we recovered from it. But it's important to step out of our bubble sometimes. And I feel a lot of architects go to other architects who are also in the same mess. And so then everyone kind of stays in this contained bubble and doesn't kind of get out of it. They don't get
Yeah,
out
it's
of
an
it.
echo chamber for sure. And because everybody else is doing it or saying it, you think, well, this is the truth. This is what it is. But it doesn't have to be that way. I've done whole episodes on the state of our profession because I do feel like there's a lot of systemic codependency, and it starts with how we're educated and it gets perpetuated in how firm leadership often works and the dynamic with clients, and we train clients to devalue us and treat us poorly, so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think it's really interesting that you kind of picked right up on that, like, oh yeah, I can see what you're doing here. So, could you tell people who might be interested in breaking that cycle, learning more about how to tell their unique story, do some of this ethical persuasion on their own, how they could work with you?
Absolutely. So you can find us at our website, www.impact.eco. And within that, we have a few resources. First of all, we like to just start with conversation and to see if there's a fit. We have several conversation sales process in which we really just pull out your uniqueness. Like, what is it that you want to actually achieve? And mainly, are we the right fit? Because it's as the conversation probably alluded to, it's very important for us to find fit and help our clients be able to find those the fit outside of that. And we typically give you a high level overview of the strategy that's possible for exactly where you are in this moment of time. If you go on a website, we also do have a bunch of resources in a pop-up that will be able to audit your current level of storytelling in your firm, and as a result, give you a score that you can work with, and subsequently we can work with to improve. And so we really take that kind of story-driven approach, and you can see high level without even engaging in conversation with us if where your storytelling is at compared to uh, kind of the industry standard and subsequently what's possible.
Well, that's really cool. I want to try that. But I just think you may be unlocking the difference between the story you're actually telling and the one you may think you're telling.
Hmm. That's big. And we invite people to be realistic in the answers on that audit to be able to, get the correct result because yeah, sometimes we think we're telling a great story and we're really set and under the clients come to us, it's like, oh, we want to tell this story. And our first response is, well, why? Let's unpack that and let's see where you're actually at.
Well, this has been really great. I love what you're sharing. I love your commitment to the design world because we need people on our side for sure. It's been so great talking to you. Thank you for being on today.
No, thank you. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. And if I can inspire people to step into their truth and, bring more wellness into the world through design, then it's a great pleasure for us.